Have you ever wondered how a particular catamaran performs out on the water? How fast it sails when it's loaded up with typical cruising gear, and what angles it's capable of sailing to the wind? In this video we're going to show you all of that for our boat, a Seawind 1170 catamaran, which at less than 40 feet long and quite a lot of space and storage on board might surprise you. We will sail with every single sail we have on board and at every angle to the wind to show you what she's capable of in the real world on the water.
So when I'm interested in a boat, when I want to learn about it, I tend to just get on the internet and just Google it, usually on YouTube first, honestly. And most of the boats out there, especially sailboats, especially catamarans, when you YouTube it, there's 5 walkthrough videos of that boat, and you get like a boat tour, and some are better than others, some are old, some are new. At least most of the time you get a good sense of what the boat is about through those walkthrough videos. But to me, half of a catamaran is how well it sails. And it's honestly kind of rare that I find a video that really shows a boat's sailing performance. Once in a while, I'll find a video that, you know, they're on a certain tack or a certain angle, and you can kind of get a sense of the speeds that they're doing in the wind conditions that they're in and the sea conditions. So we'll show you all points of sail with the spinnaker up, with the screecher, the mainsail of course. And before we get started, I'll let you know that we have all our cruising stuff on the boat. We live on the boat full time, so everything we need to live on the boat full time and all our cruising stuff. And we have some toys on the boat, but at the same time we're also like relatively weight conscious and stuff conscious. Everything on the boat pretty much has a home. We try not to have our boat be like overloaded, and I try not to have just like excessively heavy things on the boat, especially for no reason. With that being said, we also are actually the lightest that we almost ever are right now because our water tanks are basically completely empty. We'll be making water on our way back in here, and our fuel tank is pretty low as well. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but all that liquid weight actually equates to probably a little bit over 2,000 pounds. Even for a boat like this that's not super weight sensitive, 2,000 pounds is going to make a little bit of a performance difference.
Hey guys, here's a super short reminder that we just restocked a bunch of merch in the Tula shop. The link is in the description if you're interested.
So while we're motoring out and just getting in position to be able to raise the mainsail, I'll give you a quick rundown of our sail quiver, our sail inventory. They're all Doyle Cruise laminate sails, and to me, this is the perfect quiver. I think the only thing we're missing is maybe like a big parasailer or a big symmetric spinnaker for like dead downwind, light wind conditions. But other than that, like, it's perfect. Each sail kind of overlaps with the next sail in terms of you can kind of use one or the other, and then they all have their sweet spots as well. So we obviously have our square top main, Doyle Cruise laminate square top mainsail with 3 reef points in it. Then we have our 95% self-tacking jib, and the self-tacker makes it so easy to just do maneuvers with this boat. We only have to touch the wheel. I could press the 2 buttons on the B&G and the boat tacks, and we don't have to touch the sheet at all. The disadvantage of a self-tacker is that you kind of lose sail shape a little bit as you come off the wind. You can kind of combat that by barber hauling the sheet a little bit. It just has a lot of twist as soon as you start sheeting out as you come off the wind. But fair trade-off, really nice sail. And then from there, we have a bigger headsail called a screecher. A screecher is a relatively flat cut, bigger, slightly lighter weight sail than the jib. And we can use that sail in like basically all reaching conditions from like 45 degree, which is pretty tight actually for that sail, but 45 degree apparent wind angle all the way down to, I mean, we could sail with a deep downwind, but it's most effective down to like, I don't know, like 110, 120, 130. And then we have our asymmetric spinnaker that gets flown off the bowsprit, and that sail is amazing. In light conditions, we can sail it all the way up to 80 degrees apparent wind angle. And then, of course, all the way down to about 170 degree apparent, or it's really true, 170 degree true wind angle. We could fly it deeper than that, but not with the mainsail. Any deeper than that, the mainsail starts to shadow it. In rough conditions, we can't quite go all the way to 170. Our max is kind of like 160 degrees. Otherwise, the boat kind of rocks and rolls, and it gets shadowed and collapses and then inflates. So we kind of limit it to like 160, even 155 sometimes. So that's our quiver. Looks like we definitely have a little bit of breeze, so I think this is gonna be nice. All right, let's get the main up. You guys, we're sailing. Engines are off. We have a nice little breeze, 13 knots, true wind, so this is gonna be perfect. I think we should use the screecher as our first sail. We'll show you how far upwind we can point with the screecher and what kind of speeds we'll do with that. This is, we're gonna push it a little bit. We're gonna push it, just like we did in the Bocas race the other day, but I think it'll be all right. Apparent. Let's see if we can get a little bit closer to 40 apparent with the screecher. Guys, we're cruising. So we have 13 or 14 knots of true wind. We have 19 knots of apparent wind, and we're doing 8 to 8.5 knots. And we're set at 40 degrees apparent wind angle with the screecher. But there you go, 8 knots upwind at 40 degrees apparent. That's 60 degrees true wind angle with the screecher, doing 8 to 8.5 knots in 16 knots of wind. All right, let's bear away a little now because we're pretty loaded up. We're pushing the screecher to its max, like probably beyond what they recommend for this sail. I'm gonna bear away, Sierra. I need your help back here. So we're at our new angle now. I set it to 60 degrees apparent with the screecher and the full main up still. 16 knots of wind. We're doing between 8.5 to 9 knots, holding steady right at 8.8. This is one of the best angles, but as we bear away another 20 degrees, that's like my favorite angle with a sail like the screecher. So yeah, we're flying. 9 knots in 16 knots of wind. Fun. All right, let's bear away another 20 degrees. We'll bear away 30 degrees. Alright guys, now we have the angle set to 90 degrees apparent. The true wind is back behind our beam at 120 degrees, but the apparent wind is all the way forward at 90 degrees. This is like probably the perfect wind angle for the screecher, because when you can keep that apparent wind right on the beam or just in front of the beam, but the true wind is behind the beam, that is awesome, because you still usually get nice flow around the sail still. It's not just dragging the sails downwind, you're getting actual flow and lift onto the sails, and there's not a ton of pressure in them. So we're doing about 8 knots in 15 knots of wind. So 7.5 knots in 15.5 knots of wind. So 7.5 to 8 knots, 15, 16 knots of wind. So not quite as fast as our previous angle, but pretty good still. And let's come off the wind another, let's see, we're gonna have to jibe, Sierra.
Are we like throwing it in and then throwing it out?
No. Just do it like the spinnaker. Alright, you ready? Go ahead.
I'm trying.
Keep going. That's good right there. We're at the last angle we'll test with the screecher, which is 110 degrees apparent. So now the apparent wind is behind our beam. We're more in the territory of wanting to use the asymmetric spinnaker now, but sometimes in cruising we definitely use the screecher in this scenario. It's just easier sometimes. Like overnights and stuff like that. It's just easier to furl it in, put it away if the wind picks up too much. But we're at 110 apparent. The true wind is all the way back at 135 degrees. And we're doing 7 knots in 16 knots of wind. About 7 knots and 16 knots of wind. So I think it's time to put the screecher away and we'll get the spinnaker out and see what we can do with the spinnaker. Ready? You can do that sheet, I'll do the furler. Okay.
perfect bed. No, 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 no.
Baby, you think she's trying to stop us from putting it out?
I don't know, but she's never done this before. Oh, she's so cute. You like that sail. You know it's yours.
She doesn't like it though, because it makes too much noise for her sometimes.
Isn't she so cute? Daddy, what are you doing?
All right, ready to hoist? Go ahead. Alright, so we're sailing with the asymmetric spinnaker right now. We have our autopilot set to 170 degrees true wind and actually 168, just off. Because even at 170, that's like the deepest we can sail with the asym. Any deeper, and even at 170, as we kind of turn back and forth, the main shadows the spinnaker, and it'll collapse and then fill back up and collapse. So like if you're steering by hand or if your autopilot's really good, and ours, I probably just have to tweak the settings, you get away with just about 170, but realistically like 165 is a better angle to sail with. And then as the conditions get rougher and rougher, we have to sail a little bit higher and higher than that, 170, 165, just because there's more shadow behind the mainsail. We run into the spinnaker a little bit more, it collapses a little easier. So let's start heating it up and see. So boat speed right now is 6.5 knots, and we are seeing 12 to 13 knots of true wind speed. So 6 knots and 12 knots of true wind, a little more than that even. 50% wind speed, deep downwind at 170 degrees with the spinnaker and the full main. All right, let's heat it up and I'll trim in the spinnaker a bit and we'll see what else we can do with it. We'll come up all the way up to 150 degrees true and we'll see what kind of speeds we do there. We're at 150 degrees true wind angle now, and we're already speeding up a bit. We're doing 7 knots in 13 knots of wind, 7.5 knots in 14 knots of wind. And as we come up higher and higher, we'll keep increasing that speed. Like I said before, we can sail this spinnaker all the way up to like 80 degrees apparent when it's light conditions. Probably a little too windy today for that. But we'll see how high we can get. So we'll heat it up a little bit more. All right, we're heated up to 130 degrees true wind angle. the apparent wind angle's at 100 degrees, and we're already doing 8.5 knots in 15.5 knots of wind. So starting to speed up a bit more. We'll see if we can squeak a little more out of here. We'll probably get it up to like maybe 90 degrees apparent, and probably call it there. But all right, guys, we're at 120 degrees true, 85 degrees apparent, and we're doing 8.5 knots in less than 15 knots of wind. We're almost at 9 knots boat speed in less than 15 knots of wind still. I don't want to risk, yeah, we're at 80 degrees apparent right now just because we're picking up so much speed. Let me trim in a little. Whew. Yeah, almost 9 knots. So this is where we get some of our fastest speeds, especially on some surfs. A little too common here to really get any surfs, but yeah, definitely making good speed. 8.5 knots and 14.5 knots of wind still. So let's bear away. We'll get some pressure off of this sail. Guys, this is the best sailing conditions. I love sailing with the spinnaker downwind, cruising along. We're back to being deep downwind, and we're doing 6.5 knots boat speed still, but just flying, just no pressure in the boat, just easy sailing, quiet, so nice. This is the best, isn't it? I love this sailing.
Yeah, when it's calm.
Back upwind.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna take the spinnaker down, and we'll get the jib out, and we'll beat back upwind, and you'll be able to see what kind of speeds and angles we're able to do with just the jib. Hopefully, the wind picks back up. It kind of lightened up down to 9 knots, but which is less than ideal for the smaller jib. We like to see at least 14 knots. 14 knots plus is like where the jib likes to be, and anything less than that, and we might be using the screecher to beat back upwind. Let's get the spinnaker down. I'm just adjusting the leech line so the leech stops fluttering so much. We're close hauled. We're about as close hauled as we can be. I find that we can be anywhere from 35 to 40 degrees apparent. The rougher it is, the further off we have to be, and sometimes if it's really rough, it's more like 45 plus degrees off, especially if we have plenty of wind. But in flat water, 35 is really pushing it, really pinching, and we start to lose a good amount of speed at 35 or anything less than that. And then 40, we can still retain like basically as all our speed. Somewhere in there is our magic angle. But we have our set angle to 37 degrees apparent, so that's 55 degrees true wind angle. And we're doing 7 knots. 7 knots and 14 knots of wind. So I guess we'll tack here and then we'll fall off and we'll see what else we can do on some different angles. So hungry.
All right, we're tacking. We're gonna use the autopilot tack here. I'll show you how easy it is. And now, because we have a self-tacker, we don't even have to touch a sheet. That's such a nice feature of this boat, and like this boat, we've never had an issue tacking. This boat it tacks so well, we don't get stuck in irons at all. We saw in the race yesterday, or a few days ago here, that a bunch of catamarans like were having trouble tacking. They kept getting stuck in irons, even some really nice performing boats. So just makes you appreciate when something works really, really well on your own boat. I just want to share something with you guys that I learned from someone else's YouTube video. It's actually a channel called Young Barnacles, and they're like professional sailors, professional racers, but they live on, I think they live on full time, and they're working on this older catamaran. But anyway, they have some really good like high-end composite works and stuff like that, but also some really good sailing tips as well. And one thing that I learned from them that's been really useful for me is looking at your rudder indicator angle. On catamaran, it's a little more tricky than on a lot of monohulls to like feel the helm. You can still feel some weather helm in the helm, but it's a little less sensitive than other boats. But one thing, especially when it's on autopilot, which we're sailing on autopilot 98% of the time, you can look at your rudder indicator, your rudder angle indicator, and you can tell how much angle is in the rudder. So it's basically how hard the helm is working, and that indicates how much weather helm or lee helm is on the helm. So I like to have a little bit of weather helm, so in this case it should be, yeah, -1, 2, even 3 degrees is fine, and it'll be back and forth between there and 0 degrees. But if you're seeing consistently more than 3, 4 degrees of rudder angle, your boat might not be in balance, and you're kind of just slowing yourself down a little bit by having so much rudder angle, having to correct the balance of the boat. So if you keep it at just a slight amount of weather helm and just a slight amount of rudder angle, you'll be faster overall. And that's something that I learned from those guys, and I think it's worked really well for me. Like, you know, you can look at your sails, see if they're in trim and everything, and it's just another tool to use to see if everything's in trim, if you're sailing to your potential, or if the boat is like way out of trim, something's wrong. Like, you know, if you see 5, 6, 7 degree rudder angle consistently, something's definitely wrong. Your main might be like way oversheeted, or your traveler may be way up hot too far. Anyway, something I thought I'd share with you guys. So wind dropped a little bit. We're just under 12 knots, but we're still doing 6.5 knots boat speed. We're at 35 degrees apparent wind angle, and we're at like, yeah, 50 to 55 degrees true wind angle. So we'd be tacking between like 100 to 110 degrees across, probably about more like 110, and sailing well. All right, let's just bear off a little bit, and we'll see what we can do at like, I don't know, like our max angle using the jib in these conditions. So we'll come off like 10 or 20 degrees. All right, there we go. So we fell off 20 degrees, 55 degrees apparent wind angle, and we're doing about 7 knots in 12 knots of wind. So we picked up a little bit of speed, and, oh, dolphins. Here we go. Here, there's dolphins. All right, so there we go. And if it was a little bit windier, we'd definitely be cruising a bit more. If we had 15 knots of wind, we'd be doing, yeah, 8 knots all day long. This boat, for how much room it has, how much space it has, how much volume, how much carrying capacity it has, still sails really well, especially in calm conditions. I will say, as the conditions get rough, if we're feeding into it or we're on a close reach or even a reach, definitely slows us down a little as those waves and water just comes up and hit the chines on the outside of the boat. But then as we fall off the wind and the wind picks up, even if we do have big seas, we still are cruising pretty good. And it points pretty good too. So for a less than 40-foot boat with everything we have and living on it full time, like, yeah, sails pretty good. No rocket ship, but it's all a balance, and honestly, it's a really, really good balance on this boat. So right now, let's roll some of the other footage we have from different times sailing, where we talk about some of the real life sailing speeds and conditions out in the open ocean. This was from when we were in the Bahamas last season, and it's pretty light wind and pretty calm seas. The wind was just under 10 knots, and we were trying to sail as close to the wind as possible with the screecher and of course the full main. So we had the autopilot set to 40 degrees apparent wind angle, and we were doing pretty good at around 5.5 knots boat speed. You can see that we have the screecher sheeted in pretty tight, and the foot is touching the martingale, which is that wire cable that runs over the forward beam. Since this video, I've raised the screecher a bit to avoid it touching the martingale when we were sheeted in tight. And we were lucky enough to catch a nice mahi on this sail. Finally got the fish!
Oh, he's perfect! Oh, yay!
On this day we were sailing up in the Chesapeake with 2 reefs in the mainsail and the full jib out in 25 to 30 knots of wind. The wind was off our quarter and we were flying along pretty consistently around 10 knots with some quicker surfs. If it got much windier, we were prepared to put the 3rd reef in the mainsail. And here's another day where we were sailing in one of the bays in North Carolina, and it was even windier this day. It was 25 to 35 knots of wind, and we had 3 reefs in the mainsail, and we even had the jib furled up a little bit. But again, the wind was on our quarter, and we were sailing pretty fast. To 12 knots. So it definitely got a bit rougher out since we're out of the lee of all the spoil islands and shallow water. Nice little waves, and we're surfing down these little waves at up to 12 knots, between 10 and 12 knots on the surf, which is pretty cool. These are some of my favorite conditions to be sailing in. It's not too crazy because we're in a bay still. Average has been like 8 knots probably. An average is 8 knots. Funny thing about catamarans, you know, they're known to be fast, right, in general. Even though you can have fast, high speeds, like even though we're surfing at 10 to 12 knots, and we're seeing 8 knots all day long, we are dipping down to 7.5 knots a lot. This is something we noticed on adrenaline as well. It's hard to maintain high averages. Like to maintain a 10 knot average, you gotta be doing mid to high teens pretty consistently. And that's compared to like monohulls. Like I feel like monohulls are a little bit heavier, a little more consistent in their speed, so it's a little easier to maintain the average of the numbers you're seeing. Where again, as a catamaran, you've got to be sailing pretty fast to maintain relatively high averages. Alright guys, well, I hope you like this video. I hope that gives you a good idea of the real life, realistic sailing performance of this boat. Again, it frustrates me like crazy when I can't find that information on certain boats. Can't believe it's not out there. and especially from just users, your everyday user. So really hope that helps. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you have any questions, if you think I missed anything or got anything wrong, just let me know in the comments. And thank you guys as always for watching, and thanks for your help. Sierra's making some lunch right now. Did you have fun?
Yeah. I'm making tuna tacos.
If you made it to the end of this video, then you definitely enjoyed it, or at least got some good value out of it. If you'd like to support this channel, then click the link in the description and head over to the Tula shop, where we have a bunch of awesome merch, including the comfortable and stylish hooded sun shirt I was wearing in this video. Thanks for watching.